We are at Chav Daled Amid Base at the bottom. So the Mishnah had said that you can't burn, you can't use oil that is shemen sreifa, oil that needs to be burnt, which we said was the oil that is teruma, that is invalid. That's tamei. And we said the reason you don't do that is because the Torah tells us that you can't burn kachim, and since you can't burn kachim, you also cannot burn. You also cannot burn teruma to man. So how do we know we can't burn kachim that on Yantiv? So we had the first opinion was in Chizkiah, because it said by the Korban Pesach that you should burn it if it's left over to the morning, and it says a second time, and what's left to the morning you shall burn. So to the morning is the second morning, meaning you can't burn it on Yantiv, it would be the next day. The second verse that we saw was that because it says Ola Shabbos b'Shabbata, and Shabbos you can only bring its korban Ola, but you can't just bring any Ola on Shabbos, which tells us that on Shabbos you can only bring kachim on the mizbeach of that day, but the yesterday's or tomorrow's korban you cannot bring. The third pasuk that we said, Rava says it's from the pasuk Hu levado yasalachem. So we started with that. It says that food can be cooked on Yantiv. You're allowed to cook that which an individual will need and is a typical thing to eat, but a typical thing to do, which we call achal nefesh or davar shava achal nefesh, but only that and nothing else. So hu levado, that itself may be done and nothing else. So what does that mean? So hu, we said, that and not machshirin, not what's needed to as a preparatory act for that. Only the thing itself and not some preparation. And the second thing is levado itself and not mila. So we said the asya b'kavachim. So we stopped at that, and here's the kavachim. The Torah says that there's a drash in the Gemara in Perek Releza that you do a bris milah even if there's a tzaras, even if there's a leprosy, a tzaras in the bris, where we say that the Torah says you're not allowed to hishama b'neged tzaras. Be careful about the neged tzaras. You're not allowed to remove a tzaras. It's not a physical ailment, and therefore you're not allowed to remove it. It's a tuma, and you have to leave it there. So, but if it's at a place where if you do the bris, you will remove it, that you're allowed to. So we see the bris supersedes the prohibition of tzaras. Tzaras is something that docha avoda, that if somebody, a kohen who has tzaras, cannot do the service in the Beis HaMikdash, we see that tzaras is stronger and supersedes the service in the Beis HaMikdash. And we know that the service in the Beis HaMikdash supersedes Shabbos, like we just saw, that you can do the service of the day, Ola Shabbos, b'Shabbata on Shabbos. So if we make a calculation, we have bris supersedes tzaras, tzaras supersedes avoda, the service, and avoda, the service, supersedes Shabbos. So what follows is that bris supersedes Shabbos, since bris supersedes tzaras, the service, the leprosy, and tzaras will set aside the service. And yet the service supersedes Shabbos because it's done on Shabbos. So then a bris would also be done on Shabbos, regardless of whether or not it's on time. That's the
by oil tamid. I would think that that's not a matter of what supersedes what. It's a gezeras hakasuv. It's not.
The Torah is telling us it supersedes. We can learn from that it supersedes. You're right. The Torah is the one that tells us that, but we see now it supersedes. I may have made a kal v'chomer, which is weaker, which is stronger. and then said, if tzaras can supersede avoda, which supersede Shabbos, and bris can supersede tzaras, then for sure bris can supersede Shabbos. Yet it doesn't. But that's the kavachomer. Therefore, the Torah needed to say hu levado, this itself, only the cooking, and to exclude bris shalabazmana. Amar Ravashi, Amar Ravashi says that it comes from a different teaching, because it says regards to Shabbos, regards to Yontif, that b'yom harishon Shabboson, the first day is a day of rest. B'yom hashmini Shabboson, so that's an asay. So the resting of Yontif is both a positive commandment, Shabboson, and a negative commandment, not to do malacha. So if we say, since the Torah says not to do malacha, kol malacha le'yasabeh, that you're not allowed to do malacha, and it also says that it's Shabboson, it's a positive and a negative. Which makes Yontif both a positive and negative commandment. We are now on Chaf Hey Amid Aleph 25a at the top. So the positive commandment of burning the korban cannot supersede a positive and negative commandment. So we have a rule that says asay dochalus asay. When the Torah gives you a positive commandment, and you have a los asay, a negative commandment, if they collide, if they come together at the same point, and you cannot do one without the other, the positive commandment supersedes the negative commandment, unless the negative commandment is also a positive commandment, such as Yantif. That's what the Gemara is saying here. We have, even though you have the positive commandment of burning the kachin, the nosar, that's true. You have a positive commandment, and the prohibition of not doing work is a negative commandment. It's a los asay, and therefore the asay docha los asay. You should say the positive commandment is what supersedes the negative commandment. However, Yantif also has a positive commandment, and of course, the one positive commandment cannot supersede the other positive commandment, which also has a negative commandment. And a positive commandment does not supersede a negative and positive commandment. So Gemara says,
what's the positive commandment there for Yontif that's connected?
The Torah says on the first day of Yontif, the last day of Yontif was Shabboson. They are rests, positive. Oh. So Gemara says, okay, so we had 4 sources for not burning kachim on Yontif. Yontif with the asa b'chol shaper dami. But on a weekday, you can burn a teruma. So we said that you can't use this oil because maybe, just like you can't burn kachim on Yontif, you can't burn teruma termeya on Yontif. But I could burn teruma termeya on a weekday and benefit from it. That's what the Gemara is saying. My timer. So why can I benefit? Why am I allowed to use this oil as a fuel on a weekday? Amarav kashem shemitzah lisref akotshim shenitma'u kach mitzvah lisref ateruma shenitma. Just as there's a mitzvah to burn kotshim that became tamei, there's a mitzvah to burn teruma that became tamei. And the Torah gave us permission that you're allowed to benefit from it when you're burning it. Where is that in the Torah? Rav Nachman. We learn it from Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman, Rabbi Rabu Makra. It says in the pasuk Ba'ani, I have given to you the guarding of my plural terumos, of my terumos. So let's talk about 2 states of teruma. Achas teruma tameya v'achas teruma ta'ora. One is the teruma when it is in a tar state, and one is when it's already became tamei. And in either one, you need to guard it and keep it and use it in the correct manner. And the Torah says that it's for you. So it's yours. You can use it to a benefit, meaning you can when you burn the teruma, you will use it to benefit as a fuel beneath your fire, beneath your pot. So you're cooking something. You can use your teruma oils, your teruma tame as a source of fuel for your heat. Or if you want, we can learn it from Rabbi Abo. It says in regards to Meiser, when a person brings his tithe to Biur Meiser, is what he's taking, completing his Meiser. So he says, this I did not consume any of it or burn any of it when it was tummy. That's only Meiser, tithe. Which precludes that this is only in Meiser, but teruma I'm allowed to burn. Gemara says, so maybe we could say the same thing and say that what it means is you're allowed to benefit from burning the fuel of kachim, the oils of kachim. Shenit mother became tummy. So Gemara says, no, for sure not. Law of kavachomer, it's a kavachomer. Meiser hakal, the tithe is a lesser of a lesser kodesh than kachim. Amra Torah lebiatim enamatami, and yet the Torah says that he has to say he didn't consume it or burn it when it was tamei. Kodesh chamor, kodesh, which is more strict. Look, al shakeh. And Kodesh is for sure more strict. It has a lot more rules. Meiser, you're consuming it anywhere in Yerushalayim, even a non-Kohen. Ihachi Teruma Nami. Well, Teruma has the same thing. Teruma is stricter than Meiser, and yet Teruma, you're saying you can deduce from the fact that it says I did not consume the Meiser. That is allowing for a space to say that Teruma you are allowed to consume. It's a kavachomer. So he says, "Aksiv mimenu." Yeah, but the Torah, by saying of it, I did not consume, to tell us that there is something that you're allowed to consume when it's tamei and benefit from it. The Gemara says, great. So we have a teaching that tells us that you're allowed to consume something. Either way, what you're going to be allowed to consume is going to be stricter than Meiser. So why are you saying that we'd rather say that the Torah means to allow teruma and not to? And why don't you want to say that the Torah allows kachim if they're both stricter than Meiser anyhow, and yet the Torah is going to allow it? So why? What do you see to say that it's referring to kachim is allowed and Meiser is not allowed? Mistabra, it's logical. Kodesh le'mimatinu shekain siman panak akas, because there's all of these strict halachas that apply to kachim. What are they? So there's a mnemonic here, panak akas, and it means this: pigul, that the wrong intent of the in kachim. If you intend to eat it beyond the time that the Torah said that you're allowed to eat it, just the intent at the time of the service is going to make the korban pigul. It's going to make it invalid and prohibited to eat. No, sir. That once you have a short amount of time you're allowed to eat it, and then beyond that, it becomes invalid. Korban, that it has a term korban, it is a dedication to become close to Hashem. Me'ilah, if you misuse it, there's a special korban that you have to bring, asham me'ilos, and you have to pay back 125%. By teruma, you don't have that. Vikaris, and there's the punishment of karis, which is a spiritual death, being cut off from its source. Rashi and Tues over here go into the difference between just a death penalty from Shemayim, which meaning that it's worthy of death from heaven, but it's not a based in capital punishment, which is what applies to teruma. And in kachim we say kares, which is also a death from shemayim, but it's a stricter or more severe. Rashi says it means ariri, will lose everything he has. Tosa says that it could be more of a spiritual thing. Others say either way, there's a distinction. So kares seems to be more severe, and asar la'onin, and additionally, kachim onin, somebody who has an immediate relative that passed, is an onin, and he's not allowed to eat. He's not allowed to eat kachim, but teruma he's allowed to eat. So we have 6 things that are unique and strict in regards to carbon. So Gemara says, Adarabba, teruma loymematin, and we should not exclude teruma shekain machpaz, because it has 4 things that it's stricter than kachim. Simon, so misa, it has the death penalty from shemayim, again not in the courts, but in shemayim. And really this is a difficult thing to see, because the Gemara just said kares is a reason why kachim should be considered stricter, and now we're using misa as a reason for teruma to be stricter. So it seems like that they're not necessarily one more severe than the other, but really that each one is its unique. It has its unique strength of punishment from Shemayim, from heaven. Now, so it says Misa Chomish, that you have to pay back a 25% afterwards. Now, even though that Kodesh also has that, right? We just said that by Kachim you also have to pay back. However, there's a distinction. Kachim, only the part that goes onto the Mizbeach has, or that the Kohen is not allowed to eat yet, is where the Me'ilah applies. But once the Kohen is allowed to eat it, it no longer has this rule. Whereas teruma, even all teruma is supposed to be eaten by the Kohen. So even the part that's eaten by the Kohen, if somebody eats that, takes that, is going to have to pay back 125%. We're now chafayim at base. Ve'ein lapidyon, and there's no redeeming. Kachim can be redeemed. Teruma has no redemption. Va'asura lazarim, and there's no teruma that's allowed to a non-Kohen. There are various kachim that are allowed to a Kohen. So maybe we say teruma is stricter. No, hanach nafisha. Kachim nevertheless has more strict rules, and therefore it is logical that you can't burn kachim. You can't benefit from the burning of kachim, but you can benefit from the burning of teruma. Or perhaps the reason why you can say that you cannot benefit from the burning of kachim, just the very fact that kachim is has kares. Kares is a more severe punishment, and that in and of itself is the reason. The Torah says that when you give teruma, you should give it for him to the Kohen that he can actually eat it. Meaning, don't use your tamei produce to give as teruma. So somebody has a whole bunch of grapes, and he needs to give the Kohen teruma. So he says, you know what? I have a few bunches of grapes that became tamei. I'm going to give that as my teruma. And even though, well, what's the Kohen going to do with it? Well, he can use it as fuel. And the Torah says, no, don't give it to him as fuel. Give it to him something that he can eat. By the very fact that the Torah says, don't give it to him as fuel, give him something that he can eat, tells you that If you gave it to him as teruma, he'd be allowed to use it as fuel. The Isser, the Torah, the prohibition of the Torah to give teruma tamea indicates that if you gave it to him, he could benefit from it. So we see that he could use it for benefit. So that's the end of our teruma tamea and Shemen Sreifa. Gemara now is going to get into the basis really of Shabbos candles. Rabbi Shmuel said in the Mishnah that you cannot use itran, which we said is a type of turpentine-like, a foul-smelling fuel, which comes from refined sap. So my time, what's the reason that Rabbi Shmuel says you're not allowed to use this as your fuel in your Shabbos candles? Amar Rava or Rabba, because it smells bad. Gzeira, so we're concerned, and there's a gzeira, shemi yanichena v'yetze. Maybe he's going to leave the candles and walk out. Gemara says, so what? Amalei abaye v'yetze. So let him walk out. The mitzvah is to light the candles. If he doesn't like the smell and he used a bad smelling candle, so he won't like it, so he'll walk out. What loss is there in that? Why do you then? That's his choice. Why are you making a gzeira and saying he can't use this oil? Let him use it. And if he doesn't like it, he'll walk out. Amar lei shani omer hadlakas ner b'Shabbos chova. Because I say that that lighting the candle on Shabbos is chova, is an obligation. Now this is odd, because he says, I say it's a chova, as if like this is some novel idea of his. We have a whole Mishnah telling us what you're allowed to and what you're not allowed to use for lighting your candles for Shabbos. This is not his new idea. So what does he mean by chova? So first of all, we talked about this a little bit. We're going to now encounter some of this, that there are various terms the Chachamim use for enactments or for prescriptions that they give us to do, and they mean different levels of obligation and different terms. So we have over here, I'd say it's chova, it's an obligation. We're going to encounter also rishus. You have it's optional. Well, it's optional. Well, it was optional before the Chachamim said so. So it's more than just optional. Optional means it's something you should do, and here's my recommendation. It's a recommendation. Here's what you should do, but it's not an obligation. So it's a different level. It's a lesser degree of Chachamim enactment. When the Chachamim say rishus, it's optional. It doesn't mean 50-50. If you want to do it, if you don't. Yeah, because that existed before the Chachamim said so. So anytime the Chachamim say rishus, that means here's our recommendation, something you should do, but it's optional. It's not an absolute necessity. And then we also have something they call mitzvah. Mitzvah means it's a really good thing to do. We really think you should do it. That's a higher degree, but seemingly a lesser degree than chova, obligation. So it could be that what he's saying over here is he's elevating the level of obligation, and Tues is going to go into that, where Tues deals with, do we have a bracha for lighting the candles? We know we do, but Tues says the Gemara doesn't have a bracha for it. Tues says the first text that it finds that has a bracha for candle lighting is in Reb Amram Gaon, which is an 8th, 9th century siddur, probably the first of the siddur. So is there, when Chazal say something is a chova, is an obligation, that term, do they mean that it's an obligation to the level of that you say a bracha on it? Like we see by Ner Chanukah, that it's an enactment by the Chachamim, you have to light the candles of Chanukah, and that has a bracha. Well, Shabbos, the Chachamim didn't tell us the bracha, and Tues says, but chova gets a bracha, even though it shows other terms where it says chayva that does not get a bracha. For instance, the Chachamim say that you have to wash, and we've seen this in brachos, that you have to wash your hands at the end of a meal because you dipped in salt. It says netilas yadayim. At the end of the meal is chova, is an obligation. And so if it's this level of obligation that you really need to do it, well, then why is there no bracha? So Tosa says, no, you're right. Chova usually gets a bracha. But there it's something unique because the obligation is only on account of the danger since your hands touched salt, and it may be the type of salt from that if it gets into your eyes, it can blind you, and if it's such a strong salt, and therefore you have to wash your hands to get rid of it, but not that it's an obligation in and of itself, and therefore there's no bracha on it. So chayva, this term chayva is ambiguous. Sometimes it just means you need to do it because it's dangerous, and then there's no bracha on it. And over here, you need to do it because that's the essence of the mitzvah, and therefore you do say a bracha on it. That's what Tessa says. So he either elevated or defined the level of the obligation. But Rashi Tessa say there's another point here, that he's saying that it's a chayva for you to be there with the candles. The obligation is not just to light it, but to benefit from it. So we now encounter a second reason for the Shabbos candles. We saw a couple of days ago, the Gemara said that the reason for Shabbos candles and why it supersedes Hanukkah candles, if you can only afford one candle, that you would light the Shabbos candles and not Hanukkah, because Shalom Bayis, that the purpose of Shabbos candles is the peace in the home. If you have no light at home, it's not going to be a good situation. You're not going to be able to encounter people, talk to people. People are going to bump into each other, are going to bump into things. It's not a healthy situation. It's not conducive to a peaceful home if there's no light and it's dark at night. So that's the Shalom Bayis part. That part of Shabbos candles is any form of light anywhere in the house is going to be a benefit of Shalom Bayis. However, over here, what he's saying is that Reicha Ra, and you're going to leave, is a problem because there's another aspect, and that's what he means, Chova. It's that you need to benefit from the light because that's the honor of Shabbos. And that's what Rashi says here. Kavod hu she'ein seuda chashuva ela b'makam or ke'en yimama. It is an honor of Shabbos that you have candles at your meal or near your meal, because that is an honorable way of eating. To have light and a candlelit dinner, you have light at the table when you're lighting. So we have two aspects of Shabbos candles. The first one is just to have light in the home. Any light would suffice. The second is to have candlelit dinner, so to have lights at your table or near your table. And this has halachic ramifications as well. If you're in a place that you have no candles, you cannot light the candles. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says you can, halachically, you can just make the room dark and say a bracha on turning on the lights, the electric lights in the room, just your ceiling lights, because you won't have the kavod Shabbos aspect of having candles at your dinner, but you will have light in the room for Shalom Bayis, and that in and of itself is the mitzvah of lighting candles for Shabbos. You have another aspect, which is, but if you have lights already in the house, do you have to turn the lights off to light your Shabbos candles? Because otherwise, your candles are going to do nothing towards you in front of your LED or fluorescent lights, and it's of no use. You haven't increased the light in the house, and so you already have Shalom Bayis. So it would depend. If your candles are near your table, well, then that's adding a beauty to the table anyhow. It's kavod Shabbos, and so you can make a bracha on those. However, if the candles are not near where you're eating, you would have to first get the room dark, turn off the lights in the room, and then you light the candles. This way, they're adding to your. They are the ones that are defining your Oneg Shabbos, your Shalom Bayis in the house. So it has this dual aspect of Shabbos candles. One, to enhance your meal, and that can be even if there's other light in the room. And then there's one aspect which is just to make sure that there's light in the house, a light in the room, and they have different roles to play, and which one to make a bracha on, and how to make your bracha will depend on those scenarios. So that's this meaning over here of Hadlakas Ner Shabbos Chova. It's an obligation of, besides for the Shalom Bayis aspect, it's an obligation of Kavod Shabbos to have candles at your meal. And therefore, if he's going to walk out, he's going to lose out on that aspect.
Hadlakas Neros is not a mitzvah, though? It is a mitzvah, right?
No.
Why do we say Shekit Shanu Mitzvah Tzivanu?
Well, Chova is an aspect of mitzvah. Of course, it's a mitzvah in that it's a Chachamim enactment. It's a Takanas Chachamim. And as such, we say Asher Kedushanu b'mitzvosav. It's like we saw by Hanukkah, that the enactments of the Chachamim are a mitzvah of L'saser. But it's not, when we say mitzvah, there are different terms. And Chova is a lesser degree than a general obligation. So if you had Hanukkah and Shabbos, if not for the fact of Shalom Bayis, Hanukkah is a stronger type of obligation. Yet the Chachamim said, do Shabbos candles first because peace in the home is more important. Because peace in the home is more important. But the actual level of obligation, for Hanukkah is greater than the level of obligation for Shabbos candles. I'll prove it to you. The halacha is that if you don't have Shabbos candles because you can't afford it, so be it. So you don't have it. Hanukkah candles, if you cannot afford the minimum amount of candles, one candle per night, you have to sell off an object you have in order to buy candles, because it's an obligation. Shabbos candles are a lesser degree obligation. Yet, if you have one candle, use it for Shabbos rather than Hanukkah, because Shalom Bayis is more important. So just in the levels of obligation, this is a lesser a form of level, a lesser level or the form of obligation is less. So the Amar Rav Nachman Bar Zavda Amar Amar Rav Nachman Amar Rava Amar Rav, in the name of Rav, Hadlakas Ner Shabbos Chova. There's the lighting of Shabbos candles is an obligation. However, washing your hands and feet in warm water, either Friday night, and that would be allowed Friday night if the water was heated before Shabbos. So you're allowed to wash your hands and face and feet on Shabbos with that kind of water, as we'll see later. Or some say it doesn't mean Arvis on Friday night, or rather means in preparation, in the evening, in preparation for Shabbos. And then you have to at least wash your hands and face and feet with warm water. And as the Gemara says in Shabbos, in Mod Katan, it was not so common. People would sometimes go barefoot on Shabbos, so they would wash their hands and feet. And it's reshus; it's permissible, all right? It's an optional thing. So as we said, it's optional. Doesn't mean if you want, you can. Obviously, if you want to wash your hands and feet before Shabbos in preparation of Shabbos, you're allowed to. So reshus over here means it's recommended, but there is an optional recommendation. And so that also is a level of Chachamim's enactment that you should prepare for Shabbos by washing yourself, hands and feet and face at least. But it's not on the same level of obligation as Shabbos candles, which is a higher degree of preparation for Shabbos. Va'ani omer mitzvah. And Rava says, even though Rav said it's rishus, it's this optional but recommended, I say it's a higher level. It's mitzvah. It's the right thing to do. So it's again not the same level as obligation, but higher than recommended. My mitzvah. What does it mean when he says mitzvah? As we see, this was the custom of Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai. Erev Shabbos on Friday evening, in preparation for Shabbos, and on Shabbos, and brought him a basin full of warm water. And he would wash his face, his hands, and his feet. And he would sit with linen garments, and that was considered very nice, white linen garments. He would wrap himself with it. And he put tzitzis on his linen garments. We'll talk about that in a moment. But and it was as he looked like an angel. However, the students of his would also sit in such white linen talises and garments, but they would hide the corners of the garments. Amar lehen, and he said to them, Banai, my sons, my children, did I not teach you about this? Sadin betzitzis b'shamay partim b'silim b'chayvin. What about a linen garment with tzitzis? Beishamay say it's exempt and therefore prohibited, and B'sil say it's permissible, meaning obligated. The halacha is like B'sil. So what is this going? What does this mean? The halacha is that the blue string techeles of tzitzis needs to be made of wool. Now, wool and linen is shatnez. So you're not allowed to put wool tzitzis into a linen garment. So when you have a linen garment, the white strings are going to need to be made of the same material of linen. So you're going to have linen tzitzis. However, the blue string, if you have a blue string in the proper color of blue of the real techeles, well then that needs to be wool. So Beis Shammai say that you cannot make your shatnez on a linen garment. Beis Hillel say no, it's obligated in techeles, and therefore you're obligated in, even though that you're doing shatnez, the mitzvah of tzitzis of the blue string supersedes the prohibition, as we saw before. Aseido halosasei. So therefore you're going to have that the techeles. The Torah tells us to put on techeles, and that tells us that techeles, even the blue wool string, is going to go into your linen garment. So he told them, "Why are you not wearing that? I already told you that the halacha is like Beis Shammai, like Beis Hillel, that you need to have the blue string in there." So they said, "Va'inu savri gzeira mashum ksus laila." They were concerned that the halacha is that nighttime is exempt of tzitzis. So therefore, if you have a night garment, it's exempt of tzitzis. Now, there's a machlokes as to how to interpret this. This mean at night any garment, even a day garment, or does it mean a nighttime garment even during the day? Either way, they were concerned that this applies over here, or at least others would extrapolate and think that you put tzitzis on a night garment. And the problem is going to be that if you can't put shatnez, you can't put a wool blue thread in your nighttime garment, you're making shatnez where there's no mitzvah. And that's going to be a problem. You're going to put your blue string, and that's only permissible when you're doing the mitzvah. But if you're not at the moment of doing the mitzvah, and nighttime is not tzitzis time, well, then you're going to transgress. And therefore, out of concern, they didn't do it. Now, Rashi says, and they're even though that they themselves may have been obligated or held that they were obligated, like the Rebbe said, but out of concern of of a gzeira of that somebody making a mistake, they excluded. They didn't wear it. So Rashi says, and how can you make such an enactment? Rashi brings that you're allowed to b'sheva al tasa. There's such a thing that Chachamim can say, don't do a mitzvah because the mitzvah may lead to an aver. And that enactment can be b'sheva al tasa only in passive passive transgression, not an active transgression. The problem over here is that doesn't explain this because they could have not worn the linen garment at all. Putting on a linen garment without tzitzis is not passive, that's active. So some say that actually there's no mitzvah putting tzitzis on your garment until you put on the garment. Once you put on the garment, that's when you're obligated in putting the tzitzis on. And Chazal said, well, passively, don't put it on because maybe someone's going to do the wrong thing and wear shanis. But I think that the meaning here is different. They wore, of course, they had tzitzis on the garment, but they didn't have the blue techeles wool string. They had tzitzis. They just didn't have techeles. And the Rebbe said, why didn't you put on the blue techeles? I told you that's allowed. And they said, no, we didn't want to put it on lest someone make a mistake and wear techeles, the blue wool string, on a linen garment at night. And that's a passive thing you can do because you're not transgressing of actively wearing a garment without tzitzis because you're wearing tzitzis. You're just passively not wearing the blue, and that would be okay. In any case,
I thought we learned that though from the outfit that the Kohen Gadol wore.
Oh, we do see over there as well that you have that during the mitzvah you would have the permission to wear tchelas when the shatan is when the Torah said so, like to the Kohen Gadol, or the Kohen's garments, or tzitzis as well. But it has to be the time of mitzvah. You can't just wear it beyond the time of mitzvah. And if nighttime is not the mitzvah time, so then you can't just wear it. Either a day garment at night or a night garment, either way, whichever way you're going to learn. Nighttime is exempt at tzitzis. So you couldn't wear the shatnez at night. Which is why, by the way, the Gemara we saw Menachah said that there's an enactment, unless you know you have for certain the proper blue, you shouldn't wear tcheles and say, well, maybe this is it, because somebody's going to come and wear shatnez. If somebody's convinced what they have is tcheles, they may end up wearing it in a linen garment and it's shatnez. And if it's the wrong thing, they've transgressed because it's not the right thing. So the Gemara says over there that Chazal said, kla ilan, a blue dye that's not the proper tcheles may not be worn.
Don't get them started.
What?
I said, don't get them started.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Look, I like following what Chazal say. Batiznach mishalom nafshi nashisi tova. All right, we're out of time. Tomorrow we'll say a little bit of this drash on the candles and the shalom bayis piece in the home, and then we'll go on to the other types of oils that are not valid. Yashar koach, everybody.